From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what's in store over the next 60 minutes. USDA announcing $1 billion to combat avian flu.
For me, the important piece is not just this immediate short-term goal of getting the cost of eggs down and repopulating our layers and locking our barns down, but much more importantly, perhaps is figuring this out for the long term so we're not having the same conversation over and over and over again.
And some of that funding is coming from DOGE. We have an exclusive interview with Secretary Rollins. USDA shocks the corn market, printing 94 million acres of planted corn this year. A Kansas farmer's inspiring journey to overcome adversity while still managing to grow.
Being able to get outside of what you're doing every day and hearing other people's experiences is crucial to making it a successful company.
At just 40 years old, Chase Larson's journey to farm CEO is one that made him a finalist for Top Producer of the Year. And is it too soon to worry about drought this summer? Not according to one leading ag meteorologist. He says the warning signs are already there. USDA is expecting big corn acres this year. That's according to the Ag Outlook Forum. The agency hosting its annual Ag Outlook Forum this week. It's forecasting that farmers will plant more acres of corn this year and fewer acres of soybeans, calling for 94 million acres of corn. That's up from 90.6 million last year. And that was also higher than the average trade estimates. And soybean acres, well, that projection is 84 million. That's down from 87.1 million in 2024. It's also calling for wheat plantings to be at 47 million acres, up from 46.1. We'll discuss the numbers in our roundtable discussion coming up. The Trump administration made a big announcement this week, a new plan to fight avian flu and lower egg prices at the grocery store. The plan announced by USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins involves $1 billion in funding, and we spoke exclusively with Rollins on Thursday. The plan involves 5 parts. First, $500 million investment to help poultry producers increase biosecurity measures, $400 million in aid for farmers whose flocks have been impacted by avian flu, $100 million for research into potentially develop vaccines and therapeutics for the nation's chicken flocks, removing unnecessary regulatory burdens on egg producers where possible, and USDA will also consider temporary import options to reduce egg costs in the short term. Rollins talking to me this week via phone about the plan, telling me it's aimed to address the short-term and the long-term issues with avian flu. We also asked her where the money for the plan is coming from.
We've repurposed funds from other programs within USDA, so this is not spending new money. Clearly, we're in an era where President Trump's vision is to really streamline government, but this is not that. This is outside that lane. This is a really, really important issue. You know, it's affecting every single American, not just our poultry producers. And so there's short-term and long-term fixes here.
Rollins says the administration is anticipating egg prices could still further climb heading toward the Easter holiday, a time when demand has been historically high. We also asked when the nearly $500 million for increased biosecurity efforts will happen. She says that will be dispersed immediately. You can hear the full interview on our Farm Journal YouTube page. The announcement coming just after USDA had revised its food price forecast, now expecting egg prices to rise more than 41% this year. That's more than double the more than 20% rise predicted last month. About 18.8 million commercial egg layers were impacted by HPAI in January alone, the highest monthly total since the latest outbreak began in 2022. The agency reporting the cost of eggs right now at $8.07 a dozen. We've been keeping you updated on the situation with 2 of our top trading partners, Canada and Mexico. Now, President Trump saying this week 25% tariffs on both countries are planned to take effect on March 4th. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum reaffirming her commitment to securing a deal with the U.S. to prevent the 25% tariffs, emphasizing Mexico's dedication to addressing the fentanyl crisis and maintaining strong trade relations under the USMCA. She also noted Mexico is considering additional tariffs on imports from countries without free trade agreements, particularly China. Also on trade, the Senate has confirmed Jamison Greer to be the next U.S. Trade Representative. Greer's nomination cleared the Senate by a 56-43 vote. He is a veteran of President Donald Trump's first term in dealing with China, Mexico, and Canada. The American Farm Bureau congratulating Greer, saying his experience with trade issues will help create a level playing field to help farmers and ranchers compete internationally and address food needs around the world. Well, the layoffs aren't over yet at John Deere. The ag equipment giant announcing its additional job cuts at its Ankeny, Iowa plant. In total, 119 workers will be impacted, with the layoffs happening from March through April. It's reported the plant currently employs about 1,500 workers. Deere saying in a statement to Iowa media that these layoffs continue to be a result of a struggling farm economy. The Ankeny plant manufactures grain and tillage tools and sprayers, along with cotton pickers and cotton strippers. That's it for the news. A severe weather outbreak is possible next week in the South. We'll have a check of your forecast coming up next.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Pioneer. Next level yields start with genetics proven to perform. Pioneer. Next level yields start here.
We're keeping an eye on possible severe weather in the southeast this coming week. Jack Van Meter joins us this weekend with your forecast.
Let's go ahead and start off with our jet stream. It's going to be fairly dynamic, especially going into this week. First off, we're going to start off with colder temperatures and actually a chance of snow and maybe some rain for parts of the East Coast. Take a look at Maine there. As we can see, some of the heights there really starting to fall off of that trough, but actually for much of the country going to actually be dealing with some fairly warm conditions going into next week. We do have some weak ridging in portions of Texas, but we're really going to be watching for is a low moving through, and what that's going to do is intensify a trough. And actually, we're going to be talking about severe weather. Here's that low really starting to move through the country, really digging down in portions of the panhandles of both Texas and Oklahoma there. But watch this. Watch how it deepens and starts to intensify going into Tuesday and actually in portions of Wednesday as well. And actually, for folks in the deep south, we are going to be watching for that severe weather potential. Here you are right now. So this is what the Storm Prediction Center just put out. Again, it's kind of unusual to be seeing this far out from them. But again, just something to keep in mind for the risk of severe weather. All the above is on the table. And unfortunately, tornadoes, yes, it is going to be on the list there. So again, just make sure we are staying weather aware going into this upcoming week. All right. Let's go ahead and talk about our temperatures. Fairly warm for the Gulf Coast states, as we could see for portions of Texas going off into Mississippi and actually New Orleans getting in on the warm action there. And actually, not going to be just the south there, going all the way up to Minnesota, fairly warm. Again, above average, a very fluctuating pattern, if you will, going into March. And then finally ending with our precipitation totals. As we can see, a fairly wet weather is going to be the name of the game for much, if not all, of the country. And actually, the only folks that are going to be fairly dry is going to be parts of southwestern Texas, where they're actually still going to be experiencing those drought conditions, which unfortunately, they're not going to be getting better anytime soon. But as we can see, again, more above average precipitation is going to be predicted over there for portions of Southern California, which is good news and bad news at the same time, just because they're still dealing with those mudslides every time they get some torrential rains there, just because they had a lot of damage from the wildfires. And also moving out to our east, we can see above average chances of precipitation for the Ohio Valley region. Something, of course, we'll be keeping a rather close eye on.
Well, USDA's Ag Outlook Forum this week catching the corn market by surprise. We will tell you why. Joe Vaclavic and Matt Bennett join me to talk markets next. Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. Joe Vaclavic and Matt Bennett joining us. You know, big week when it comes to Ag Outlook Forum from USDA. Matt Bennett's actually speaking at the Ag Outlook Forum this week and joining us from Washington, D.C. But Joe, I want to start with you. The big news, really what we were watching out of this Ag Outlook Forum is acreage. And USDA came out, 94 million acres for corn is what they're penciling in at this point, 84 million for soybeans, 9.9 million acres for cotton, under 10 million acres there. But when you look at this, are you surprised that USDA was so aggressive on corn acres right now?
I don't think you should be surprised. I think the trade clearly was a little bit surprised because the corn market sold off following that number. I suppose traders thought that maybe USDA would be just a little bit more reserved with its early estimate. But I'll tell you what, based on what we know about on-farm margins and budgets, it really shouldn't be a surprise. I've personally been kind of working in my head with a number that's actually higher than 94. So the 94, even though it was higher than pre-report expectations, I don't think should be a shock to anybody.
Matt, this was not survey-based, and that's something that we need to mention. Prospective plantings at the end of March, that will be survey-based. But you're at the Ag Outlook Forum right now. Did that 94 million acres for corn, did that surprise you?
No, it's actually the number I was expecting whenever it came to both corn and beans, 94 and 84. I kind of figured we'd be looking at around a 178. In all honesty, I think when you look at the economics of things, though, I really struggle to think that we're going to be below, for instance, the acreage we saw 2 years ago at 94.6. And so I thought Outlook 4 would come out a little bit conservative. I guess I was right on that, but I do think that the overwhelming trend should be higher from here, especially looking at what the economics have been leading up to this. Yield at 181 made some sense, but at the same time, I think at some of these higher acreage numbers, that might have to be dialed back at some point. Last thing I want to point out, 5 straight years, the actual carryout that they projected at this Outlook Forum, the following January, they were actually below that. So all the numbers need to be kind of taken with a grain of salt.
Joe, we've been searching for a story in soybeans. 84 million acres for soybeans down. I mean, is that the story you think that can rejuvenate this market?
It could be a story, especially if the yields were to come in light. I think, though, that there is a narrative or thought out there that, hey, if the U.S. has a light crop, there's plenty of beans around the world, and the U.S. will just end up exporting less. And that very, very well may be true. At the same time, though, if we get into a situation where soybean acres are light, the yield's light, it puts a lot of pressure on South America to produce, or a little bit more pressure at least, and it will absolutely have price implications. So I do think that there could be kind of a lurking friendly-ish story here for the soybean market, given the fact that new crop prices are so far below production costs. We're clearly going to lose a lot of acres. That could be a story, bigger picture.
Well, we also saw chief economist at USDA, Seth Meyer, release his crop price projections for 2025-2026. Corn down 15 cents from the previous year. Soybeans down 10 cents from the previous year. Matt, when you look at these crop price projections, I mean, so hard to really paint an outlook for 2025 right now, considering we're still waiting for answers on tariffs. Are we going to see the president implement those tariffs next week? Are we not? There's a lot of uncertainty. How much stock do you put into these price projections from USDA?
I mean, this is essentially the third straight year that you're looking at a deflationary type environment for both corn and soybeans. So it's pretty tough to stomach, especially whenever you saw such big profit margin in 21 and 22 drive our input costs up as much as what they did. So, how much stock do I put into them? I mean, clearly you've seen the market rally substantially from harvest lows as far as cash prices were concerned. We know that there's going to be ebb and flow with these markets. I don't want to get too down in the mouth based upon their price projections, but there's a lot of reasons why they can make these projections and essentially have some stock to put into them. So, we still have ample stocks as far as beans are concerned. But you look at corn, and it's a little different story. You've got a tightening world balance sheet, tightening U.S. balance sheet. And I guess in my opinion, I've got to think that maybe we'll actually come in above what we saw a year ago, or at least have the potential to based upon recent market performance.
All right. Well, even before the Ag Outlook Forum, we saw some price pressure in the markets. We need to talk about why, plus really what's happening with South American weather. We have an update on that. We need to take a quick break, and then Matt Bennett and Joe Vaclavic will rejoin us to talk more markets. Welcome back. Rejoining us, Joe Vaclavic as well as Matt Bennett. Joe, earlier in this week, even before the Ag Outlook Forum, we saw some pressure on these markets, specifically corn and soybean prices. Is it funds? What was pressuring prices even before the Ag Outlook numbers?
The weather in Argentina has shifted. They started off really dry and they caught some rain, and the forecast looks pretty good. So I think that there was some unknown regarding the crops in Argentina. And I think that the crop potential in the minds of traders has stabilized, at least for the moment. And if this forecast and the rains, they hit for another few weeks, they're probably going to be all right. Maybe they won't be as good as what we had thought preseason or a few months ago, but the losses that you'll see there will be limited. That's one of the factors. With regard to the corn market, we traded spot futures above $5. Maybe a correction after that big rally is healthy and necessary, and maybe it's just a correction for the sake of correction. There was one other item of interest. U.S. ethanol stocks were super high this past week, like highest since COVID lockdown type time frame. So that was of additional concern.
That's interesting. You mentioned Argentina's weather, but Matt, it sounds like it could be too much of a good thing. World Weather actually said this week that the South American soybean regions, Argentina's crop weather will trend too wet in the interior South and some central crop areas during the next 10 days, resulting in actually some flooding. And so I know the markets, the rain is a good thing, but now we're even talking flooding.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you talk too much rain, it doesn't seem like the markets, though, the market will get super excited about it unless it is, of course, during harvest. I mean, we know harvest has moved in that direction. You've got to expect that you're going to see some quality issues if that comes to pass. But, at the same time, we've already seen some of that. It's had a bit of an impact on the market, but as Joe said, essentially a lot of the crops down there, the farther south you get, corn, soybeans in Argentina, you seem to have stabilized what the losses were thought to have been. So, too much rain during the growing season, in my opinion, doesn't always pan out to much higher prices. So I think South American production right now is thought to be very stable. It's thought to be more than ample. And I think the biggest question mark moving forward is what this safrinha crop is going to look like.
Joe, when you look at soybeans, really what I keep hearing is we need to find new demand. Southwest Airlines this week, Bloomberg reporting that Southwest is actually cutting jobs in its sustainable aviation fuel operations, working to sell a renewables company. And so when you look at that news, it seems like we have some of these companies that are abandoning renewable fuels, not investing in renewable fuels. Where else could we see a story in soybeans?
You need a biofuel story, and the lack of policy from the government is the reason, I believe, why you're seeing divestment or lack of investment in that space. You need some hard and fast rules. You need 45Z guidance. You need a lot of different things from the government. And the Trump administration has just been kind of held up on a lot of this. And I think you could continue to see that sort of divestment until you see some hard policy that's going to bring them back to the table.
Matt, real quick before we go, cash cattle trade, we've seen some pressure as of late. Do you think this is just kind of short term, or is there an underlying story here that we need to keep a watch on?
Yeah, I think that there's no doubt that we ran this thing maybe a little bit too hard, too quickly. Obviously, scale back just a little bit. But at the same time, I mean, overall, this long-term story in cattle, it's a bullish one. We know fundamentals are strong. We also know that as cattle come in from Mexico, though, there's no doubt you're going to have plenty of feeders available. So you'll maybe stabilize that somewhat. But it's a long-term bullish fundamental situation. But you are completely at the mercy of, hey, what do the funds want to do? They've held a really long position for quite some time. And if they want to continue to stay long, it's one thing. But if they don't, there's no doubt that there could still be more pressure on the market in the midst of what you would call a bullish situation.
Yeah, it's scary to be at the mercy of the funds, but we've all been there in all of these markets, so it'll be interesting to watch. Joe Baklovic, Matt Bennett joining us. Thank you so much. We need to take a quick break, and then we're checking in with Machinery Pete for Tractor Tales.
Be sure to check out the Moving Iron podcast with Casey Seymour and Machinery Pete, with new episodes released every Thursday. You can find Moving Iron on all the popular podcast platforms, plus agweb.com and Farm Journal's YouTube channel.
Hey folks, welcome back to Tractor Tales. This week we're headed to Ohio to check out a 1939 Farmall F20.
The 1939 Farmall F20, which was the medium-sized tractor in IH's lineup up to 1939. They had the F12, the smaller, and the F30, which is bigger. So this is a narrow tread version, which was more common in the East. Narrow tread means the rear countershaft housing was about 18 inches narrower in dimension. This, being a late one, has the rubber tires, demountable rims. You could vary the rear tread. This also has a mounted Farmall 221 cultivator. I bought it from the son of the original owner. I'd worked on the Magneto for him over the years, and he's a little over 80 years old, and he said, I can't get on and off this tractor anymore, that it needs a new home. So he got a hold of me, and it's got a new home. So it looks nice. It's a good color. It's got the right decals. It's restored as well as I would ever restore it. So it's a local tractor, and it's going to stay local. It runs good. I've taken it to shows. I've taken it on tractor parades. I'm happy to have it. As I said, it's a last year production, so this was the end of the line for the unstyled Farmall tractors for International Harvester. You know, International had a reputation for building things probably 4 times heavier than they needed to be. And that's why they've lasted so long. Again, this is 1939. You're talking an 85-year-old tractor, and it runs good. You can buy parts for it. You could use it today if you wanted to.
Thanks, Greg. Every farmer has dealt with adversity from time to time, but losing your spouse in your 30s is something Kansas farmer Chase Larson endured. And his ability to overcome that heartbreak while raising his 4 little girls is an inspiration to all. His story is in our Farm Journal report next.
You're watching U.S. Farm Report. Trusted, timely, tradition.
For Kansas farmer Chase Larson, being the CEO of Best of 4 Farms means being the CEO of 6 different companies. The Belleville, Kansas farmer has an eye to lead and a heart to serve. And as Clinton Griffiths shows us this weekend, at just 40 years old, this top producer of the year finalist's ability to overcome adversity while still growing will inspire you.
I'm a pilot, and so there's always a plan, execute, debrief type of scenario of everything you do.
A pilot by training and a farmer by trade, Chase Larson runs his operation more like a Fortune 500 company than he does a farm.
Being able to get outside of what you're doing every day and hearing other people's experiences is crucial to making it a successful company.
From regular board meetings to his involvement in peer groups, Chase took over as CEO about a year ago.
He was doing a lot of the responsibilities up to that point, as far as negotiations, as far as cropping decisions, negotiations, relationships, everything it takes to run a farm. He earned that respect, and my feeling time was right.
He walked in and said, as of right now, my mom was there too and said, you are CEO of all Best of 4.
A surprise in a way, but Chase has always been an integral part of the operation, even buying and brokering loads of hay in college.
That's how I kind of really got into logistics and shipping, negotiating. That's how I really got into it, when we got into the trucking business.
Today, Best of 4 Hay Company and Best of 4 Farms are just 2 of the 6 businesses that make up the Best of 4 family of companies. Best of 4 has 40 employees, 30 of which are full-time. And one business that's sprouted within the past decade is a company called Grandpa's Best.
As we realized we had some really good talent around us, and being in the hay business for a long time, we said, how hard can it be to start a pet food company? And it's really hard.
The wild idea to start a pet food company that didn't come from Chase or Thane. The idea came from Chase's late wife.
She came out here and she just got a curious mind, but she walked the pastures, and she was a K-State grad, so she said, I wonder what else can eat this besides cattle. So she got 7 or 8 or 10 different species of grasses, and she sent them to K-State for research. What else will eat this? And it came back with the rabbits, gerbils.
They hired a firm to help explain the pet food business, uncovering a $3 billion pet food market worldwide.
And we said, well, sure, there's a piece of that we can find.
A business that's doubled in sales every year since 2019.
Chase and Celine, they brought a difference, and they just taken it to and put it on steroids, and all of a sudden it's taken off in a whole different direction, and we're excited about it.
Celine Larson was a light on the farm, in their family and in their community.
She was someone that was an entrepreneurial spirit, enjoyed agriculture.
In 2017, Celine was diagnosed with cancer. Their 4 kids were 2, 4, 6, and 8 at the time. And Chase's focus shifted from farming to fighting for Celine's life with treatments in Texas.
I think the longest stint was like 36 days that we never came back. My mom took him to school every day, got him ready, fed him, took over that role as why we were down there fighting cancer.
On December 9th, 2019, a little over 2 years since she was first diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma, Celine Larson passed away at the age of 35.
When she passed away, it changes your perspectives and what's important in life and what you want to do, what you don't want to do. Most people think, how do you get through things like that? But these negatives are not negatives.
Constantly striving for balance, Chase is always uncovering new ways to grow. His latest endeavor, an app for real-time water management.
And so we figured out how to write it, got the right code writers, and hired him and went from concept to that in 3 months.
The system now has thousands of wells across 3 states. Best of 4 Farms has doubled in size in the last 16 years, growing to 12,000 acres. And Chase says this 6th-generation farm isn't done yet.
Very entrepreneurial, driven, not afraid to fail, not to figure out a mistake here or there. You're not going to grow without constant change and being outside of your borders.
Chase's constant search for value, while not losing sight of the fact quality is their legacy, is why Chase Larson is a finalist for 2025 Top Producer of the Year.
Chase was one of the 3 Top Producer of the Year finalists recognized during our annual Top Producer of the Year awards banquet last week. All 4 girls were by his side. Chase actually played college football, and he constantly reminds his girls they're a team. And even though they lost one of their team members when their mom passed away, they're still one big team doing this together. When we come back, why food security is national security. Ag Around the World is next. Now for a glimpse of Ag Around the World. As trade continues to be a top priority for the Trump administration, USDA says it's going on a trade mission to Guatemala next week. The agency stressing the goal is to strengthen export opportunities in the largest economy and most populous country in Central America. And during Top Producer Summit last week, Clinton Griffiths talked with industry leaders about how U.S. food power is in focus on a global scale.
Farmers love to debate the details of their work, but there's one thing that's not up for debate. That's American agriculture is a strategic advantage for the U.S.
Food is foundational to everything when we think about economic power, when we think about military power, and the power of diplomacy. Food is essential to all of that.
Mark Purdy is a farm kid who spent more than 2 decades in the military. That includes thinking about how agriculture impacts global peace and prosperity.
America's preeminent advantage has been food, and so I think that's why we need to view that as food power, not simply producing for our population or preventing others from starving, but to be able to project food around the world for those that are prospering as well as those that are in need.
The world knows food availability is vital to national security.
Well, I think you go back to Arab Spring and the fact that what caused unrest in the Middle East here, in the post 9/11 environment was having food on tables in key parts of the world.
Greg Dowd helped lead agricultural trade negotiations during the first Trump administration. He thinks trade and national security must be strategic.
We need to go back and look at some of what our territory is from a military perspective. What's the ground you can take and hold and keep New Zealand and Europe and other countries out of there?
And if we don't rise to that level of not just production, but overproduction, so that we can project that around the world, others fill that gap. Others that don't have the same democratic ideals and the leadership ideals of others.
Purdy says today, countries like China, Russia, and others understand this and are now prioritizing their global agricultural strategy.
They know how important agriculture is because they've been through periods of time where starvation and hunger toppled their governments.
He says that risk is also our greatest opportunity.
We're extremely blessed. We've been able to take this for granted, but we're at an apex now of this great power competition to where we have to understand that and really articulate that in a serious national strategy.
Thanks, Clinton. Is 45Z a fairy tale for farmers? Chip's Corner is next. Time now for Chip's Corner this weekend with AgriTalk host Chip Flory. Chip, we did receive some news late in the week last Friday about E15 year-round in certain Western states, the Trump administration making an announcement. Give us an update and really when we will see this impact the ethanol market.
Yeah, EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin made that announcement, and that was a good news because it's the 8 Midwest states. The governors have been pushing for it. I had an opportunity to talk with the president and CEO of the Renewable Fuels Association, Jeff Cooper, last week. And Jeff said that, listen, if Congress doesn't make E15 available year-round across the entire country by this summer, that it looks like the Trump administration and Lee Zeldin is in favor of making an emergency declaration and making E15 available for this summer. So that's really good news. API, the American Petroleum Institute, is in favor of doing that. So things are moving right along. Where things are not moving right along is on things like 45Z. I asked Jeff Cooper about that. Here's what he had to say.
There are certain pieces of the Inflation Reduction Act, 45Z being one of those, that do have broad bipartisan support. And there are a number of Republicans, probably 24 Republicans in the House, that are actively advocating for maintaining, and not just maintaining, but also improving and extending some of those key tax credits like 45Z in these discussions around reform and budget reconciliation and the future of tax policies.
Yeah, the future of tax policies. The one big bill passed the House, and it is moving right along. So lots of progress to make.
Well, I'm going to borrow the words from you because you said a lot of farmers right now feel like 45Z is just a fairy tale.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that the case?
No, not according to Cooper. Cooper said that there is still a focus, and when you've got the bipartisan support like 45Z does have, it seems like Zeldin at EPA is willing to listen. And as long as he's willing to listen, there's a pretty compelling case for moving forward with some of the 45Z credits.
Well, speaking of EPA, Lee Zeldin, we actually had a exclusive conversation with Secretary Brooke Rollins on Thursday, and she talked about Zeldin as her buddy. So it seems like those two are close. It'll be interesting to see if the EPA and USDA are lockstep in some of these decisions. But Chip, also something interesting that was reported this week, and we talked about it in the roundtables, but Bloomberg reporting that Southwest Airlines is cutting jobs in its sustainable aviation fuel operations and working to sell a renewables company. That exactly is what Bloomberg is reporting at this time. So Chip, I mean, you think about Southwest Airlines, it seems like they're abandoning renewable fuels. Is E15, is that easy button? Is that the quick pathway to more ethanol demand?
E15 is the easy button. I don't think there's any question about that. We talked with Jordan Fife from BioUrgia on the show this last week, and he said, listen, we've got sustainable aviation fuel, we've got renewable diesel, and we've got year-round availability of E15. Retailers like Flying J and Pilot are making E15 available exclusively, taking E10 off the pumps and making E15 available. So when we start to hear stories like that, Jordan feels like there's a lot of momentum behind E15 out there across the countryside right now.
You know, Chip, corn demand's actually been pretty good when you look at export markets and things like that. I keep hearing from market analysts that we really need to find demand in soybeans. So too bad there's not an easy button for soybeans right now.
I wish there was, but that renewable diesel push is still happening. We just need to see if the administration is going to support that or not. There's been a lot of speculation that when we went from the Biden administration to the Trump administration, that these green fuel initiatives would just go away. So far, Lee Zeldin is keeping those initiatives on the table.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how those play out. Chip Flory, host of AgriTalk. You can catch him twice a day, every day for AgriTalk AM as well as AgriTalk PM. All right, when we come back, we are traveling the American countryside for the story of an American patriot. That's next. An American patriot who's also considered an American hero. And his famous last words left a lasting impact for centuries. Andrew McRae travels the American countryside to Connecticut this weekend.
This farmstead near Coventry, Connecticut dates to the 1770s, and one of the young men who grew up here is still regarded as a great hero of the American Revolution. Richard Hale established a farm in Coventry, Connecticut in the 1740s. He married a local girl and began a family, 12 children in all, with 10 surviving to adulthood. The 6th child was named Nathan. He graduated from Yale in 1773 and became a school teacher, eventually teaching in New London, Connecticut.
Then being in New London, he is going to meetings. He is learning about the Sons of Liberty. His brothers, he already knows that his 3 older brothers marched to Concord and Lexington for the Lexington Alarm.
Anne Marie Charlotte shares the story of the Hale family from the Nathan Hale homestead. Nathan joined the cause for American liberty as well, eventually becoming a captain in the militia. When George Washington put out the call for spies who would go into New York City and report on the movement of British soldiers, Hale stepped forward.
Unfortunately, no one trains him. They just send him on his way. He went dressed as a Dutch schoolmaster, and he was reporting on what he was finding, writing down what he was seeing.
In September of 1776, British Army officer Robert Rogers saw Hale and thought something seemed amiss. He got Hale to divulge he was a spy, had him captured, and sentenced to hang. Perhaps we would not know his story if not for an account of what he said before he gave his life for liberty.
Supposedly what Nathan's last words were, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." It's actually a British soldier who documents that, repeats that as a story. He also reports that Nathan held himself with dignity and grace until the last possible moment.
Hale's words and actions were remembered, but most likely it was another man over a century later that made sure we still know his story today.
In 1914, a wealthy patent attorney from New Haven, Connecticut by the name of George Dudley Seymour, he becomes fascinated with the story of Nathan Hale.
Seymour was determined to find the home where Hale grew up. He knew the general vicinity and found a letter from Hale's niece that provided a clue.
There's only one actual image of my Uncle Nathan, and it's on the back of a door in the old house. So now George Dudley has to find the house.
It was known as a shadow image drawn on a door. Seymour began searching abandoned homes in the area of Coventry, Connecticut, located the home and the shadow portrait on the back of a door. The home was now being used as a chicken coop. He bought it and began restoring it and publicizing Hale's story. Today, the farmstead is preserved as a historic landmark that remembers the life of the man noted to be America's first spy, a hero of the Revolution who gave his life for the new country just a couple of months after the United States declared its independence. Traveling the countryside in Coventry, Connecticut, I'm Andrew McCrae.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, there was chatter about drought this summer during Top Producer Summit last week. So why are ag meteorologists concerned? From the Farm is next. Leading ag meteorologists have growing concerns about drought not just this spring, but also this summer. As you can see here from the latest drought monitor, this is the current drought picture. The most severe shades of drought are along the northeast coast, the southwest, and across the plains. And in the plains, the lack of snowfall, well, that's causing concern about what it means for the soil moisture profile heading into spring, as well as the impact it will have on the Missouri River levels. Eric Snodgrass, a leading agricultural meteorologist, says his outlook for weather during planting is polar opposite for the east versus the west. Snodgrass's current forecast points to a dry spring for the western Corn Belt, but a wet planting season east of the Mississippi. And he's really concerned about the lack of movement in the jet stream and what it means heading into spring and summer.
If I start worrying about the jet stream losing momentum, the first indicator will be a drop off in the ocean temperatures in the Gulf of Alaska or the Baja of California. And then we start sounding the alarm, especially as we get into June. If that gets cool there, that is telling me that the atmosphere is not moving. And if it doesn't move, well, the high pressure cells that pump the moisture in, they wander off like the Bermuda High. And all of a sudden we find ourselves in a situation late June into July where we're questioning the heat, we're questioning the extensiveness of the drought, and the markets are going to go crazy over that because they're looking for something to talk about.
Another possible warning sign of drought this summer, Snodgrass says if this spring brings a really active tornado season to the southeast and not to the traditional tornado alley in the plains, that's another warning sign that the atmosphere is primed for drought during the height of summer. Well, weather and planting will definitely be a topic during Commodity Classic this year, which kicks off this weekend in Denver. We have a live taping of U.S. Farm Report slated for 7 a.m. on Tuesday, but it is a jam-packed 3 days of Classic this year, including the trade show, which spans across 12 acres and features more than 430 exhibitors this year. We caught up with Commodity Classic co-chair and Illinois farmer Rob Schaefer, who says the education opportunities at Commodity are aimed to help improve farmers' ROI.
We put a lot of time in helping sift through what are the hot topics, what are hot on producers' buttons, okay, to come up with those learning sessions to make things more relevant. Whether it's estate planning or biologicals or, anybody that's bringing stuff new, okay, to debut at Classic. That's another big thing is a lot of new chemicals or equipment or different things get debuted at Classic.
Now, there's still time to register. You can either do that by going onto the Commodity Classic website, that's commodityclassic.com, or you can also register on site in person in Denver. Again, we'll be hosting our live taping of U.S. Farm Report at 7 a.m. on Tuesday. Well, that does it for U.S. Farm Report this weekend. Again, we are on the road from Commodity Classic next weekend, where we hope you'll tune in as we work to build on our tradition. Have a great weekend, everyone.
U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.